Thanks for joining me on episode 594 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Annie Purdue-Olson from Leading Better Together. I encourage you to find the courage to lead in ministry well. And one way to be inspired to do that is by listening to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mater.
But this idea of reflecting on who you are and what you do, and then creating a new map and a new target for the future, and then beginning to work towards it and move towards it, is something that we don't just do one time. Instead, it's something that you have to do over and over again. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about why we tend to need to look forward instead of back, but often spend too much time looking back, how you can reinvent yourself when you need to, and why this is important to take a look at periodically. You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. One of the things that happens to us when things go bad, when things are going wrong, whether that's just for us personally or whether that's something like right now where we're seeing all sorts of chaos and confusion in the world around us. So we have a tendency a lot of times to begin to dwell on the past. We look to the past as a place to provide us security and safety. It feels comforting to look at the way things used to be, to remember the better times. We always tend to look back on the past with a sense of nostalgia. Or alternatively, we begin to look at the past and beat ourselves up for it. We begin to look at what came before and be upset that we didn't prepare enough for the moment that we find ourselves in today. We begin to regret lost opportunities. We begin to think about all of the things that we've done wrong. And we have a tendency to drag those things back up and begin to dwell on them in a negative way. And what I want to encourage you to do in this time is to begin to turn your attention to look forward much more than you look back, to look at the windshield instead of the rear view mirror. See, we only have a finite amount of energy, emotional energy as well as physical and mental energy. And what happens is if we spend all of that energy looking back, then we never use any of that energy productively to move forward. So we have a choice. We can focus on the future or we can focus on the past. You know, the truth is the only time you can take action is in the present. And the only thing you can do with the past is learn from it so that you can move forward more productively. And what we do with the future is we have something to plan and aim for. But times like this, sometimes what happens is we suddenly discover that we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to recognize the fact that it's a time that we need to change. And when we do that, there's some things that you need to do to be able to reinvent yourself. And let me be clear. I'm not talking about faking it till you make it. I'm not talking about reinvent in terms of lie or do something that represents you in a way that isn't true to who you are. What I'm talking about is if you've suddenly discovered that perhaps some of the things you've done in the past are things that you now want to do differently in the future, that's going to require taking different actions. That's going to require thinking different ways. That's what I mean by reinventing yourself, coming up with ways that you can think different, you can act different. So what are some steps that you can take to be able to reinvent yourself productively? First, you need to focus on the positive. Focus on the good things in your life. Focus on the good things in the world. And trust me, no matter how bad it is, you can always find something positive. Find a way to focus on the good things. Second, you want to look at your routines and your habits. Try to change things like, what are you eating? What time are you going to bed? Are you getting enough sleep? These sorts of health things oftentimes help us reset our mind. You can also look to your physical space. Clear out the physical clutter. Do a house cleaning. Do a garage sale. Get rid of things that you no longer need. Similarly, try to clear out the emotional clutter. That may be negative relationships. That may be just old memories. This is a chance to get some therapy or counseling if you need it so that you can move forward more productively. Look for ways that you can stretch yourself, move yourself a little past your comfort zone and begin moving forward. Look for opportunities to be creative and express yourself in a new way. But recognize that this is a process, not an event. Creating a new life plan and then beginning to live it out is not something that you do overnight. It takes time. You're not going to do all of this stuff and suddenly tomorrow you're going to wake up and be a whole new person. But this idea of reflecting on who you are and what you do and then creating a new map and a new target for the future and then beginning to work towards it and move towards it is something that we don't just do one time. Instead, it's something that you have to do over and over again. You have to step back and examine your life. And then you have to make sure that you're moving in the direction that you really want to go and reinvent yourself to move forward each and every day. Because the truth is, if you're 1% better today than you were yesterday, and you do that every day for a full year, you would be astronomically better off than you were before. But the only way to do that is to focus forward, to look and use your energy to take action in the present that allows you to move into the future in a powerful way. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.